Our next post is from a user. My dad sold his medals. He was an Army veteran who served multiple tours in Afghanistan and Iraq. When he got back, he worked as a police officer and eventually retired and started working security at a hospital. One day he was doing his normal rounds when he heard a group of doctors in the hall talking about a little girl who needed surgery. Apparently she had a heart defect that was discovered when she was born. The surgery was extremely expensive and the parents couldn't afford it. They had no insurance, and what little money they did have was spent on hospital bills. The doctors were talking about how they were going to have to turn her away because there was nothing more they could do. My dad overheard this and told the head doctor, "I will pay for the surgery." The doctor asked him, "How much are you able to contribute?" And my dad said, "Whatever it takes." So the doctor told him the total amount needed, and my dad said, "4,000, I can get you that." Dad went home and emptied out his display case. He took off all of his medals and jewelry and brought them to a pawn shop. He said he needed money and needed it fast. The owner of the pawn shop knew my dad from when he had done security there on the weekends, and he gave him a fair price for everything. It wasn't much, but it was enough for the surgery. He brought the money back to the hospital and paid the girl's bill in full. He didn't want any recognition for it. He just wanted to help the little girl. The doctors were so grateful and promised him that they would take good care of her. They also promised to keep him updated on her progress. He never told anyone what he had done. It wasn't until years later that he was cleaning out his closet and my brother found the box with all the medals in it. I guess he was so angry and asked our dad why he had gotten rid of them. Apparently Dad had told my mom what he'd done, but he'd never told any of his kids. He told us that he'd felt bad that the girl didn't have a chance at life because of something that wasn't her fault. He said that he couldn't bear the thought of the doctors not being able to help her just because her parents couldn't afford it. He said that he knew it wasn't much, but he hoped that it made a difference. We were so proud of him, but we were also angry that he hadn't told us. He told us that he didn't want us to think any less of him if he lost his medals. I don't think he realized that we would have been more proud of him than ashamed. After our dad died, my brother decided to start a charity in his name. The goal was to raise money for families who couldn't afford medical care for their children. Every year they hold a golf tournament and other events to raise money. They've been able to help out a lot of families and make a real difference in a lot of kids' lives. Your dad sounds like an amazing man. I'm glad that he was able to help that little girl and that you guys continue his legacy through the charity. That's awesome. Our next post is from another user. This happened over 30 years ago. My older brother was a young medic in basic training. There was another guy in his group who was very smart and likable. They became friends and hung out together during their time off. By the end of basic training, my brother and his friend were two of only 3 people in their platoon who had perfect scores on their exams. They both ended up going to advanced individual training for medics. They were happy to be going to the same 8 and possibly getting stationed together somewhere, though they weren't sure where. On the first day of class, they noticed that one of their instructors was familiar. It was the tough sergeant they had during some of their training in basic. They thought that he was a drill sergeant, but apparently he was also a medic and was teaching at the school. He pulled them aside after class and told them they were both being transferred to the same unit. My brother and his friend were excited. But the next day in class, they learned that this unit was in Vietnam. Both quickly realized that their scores must have gotten switched somehow, because they were obviously qualified to be medics, but this new assignment made no sense. The instructor explained that the mix-up had gone all the way up the chain of command. It was too late to change anything now. they were going to Vietnam. They tried to talk to the sergeant again, but he just told them to get over it and move on. They were going to Vietnam whether they liked it or not. Well, they didn't have a choice. They were in the army. A few days later, my brother came to visit my grandparents. They were upset about his upcoming deployment, but also excited for him because they thought that it was a great opportunity for him. They were living in Texas at the time, and his friend lived nearby, so he was able to come visit often. One weekend, they were hanging out at the mall when my brother finally opened up about what had happened. He was furious, told them about how he and his friend were qualified for a stateside position, and that they were only being sent overseas because of a clerical error. They talked for a while and then his friend left. When his friend came to visit, my grandparents welcomed him like a son. They invited him to dinner, gave him advice, and then he showed them the box of medals that he had received in the mail. One of the medals was a Purple Heart. It was heavy. As they were eating, my brother and his friend looked at each other and burst out laughing. They were both embarrassed to admit this, but they were relieved that the other one had gotten the medals. They had been wondering why the other one hadn't brought it up before. Now they understood. So they had both been qualified for the same position and both qualified for a stateside position. But the guy with the Purple Heart was clearly more qualified. His friend even admitted this. But instead of getting the position, he was being sent to Vietnam. Because of a mistake, his friend was taking his place. They decided to keep it between themselves and not tell anyone else. The next weekend, they both said goodbye to my grandparents and headed off to Vietnam. This story has so many plot holes. It's like if your brother and his friend were both qualified to be medics, why did only one of them get the medals? And if they were both qualified to be medics, why was only one of them getting sent to Vietnam? I'm confused. Our next post is from another user. I work with veterans, and every day I hear stories of incredible acts by veterans. The ones that stick with me are the quiet heroes. These are veterans who do good things but don't seek recognition. Recently, I was facilitating a grief group for veterans who have lost loved ones in combat. One of the members was struggling with survivor's guilt. After talking with him, I encouraged him to attend a debriefing session with his unit. This is a common practice after a deployment where everyone gets together and talks about their experience. He agreed and went to the meeting. When he returned to the group the following week, he was a changed man. He told us about what happened at the debriefing. As he was speaking, another man in the group stood up and began to walk away. I stopped him and asked him why he was leaving. He replied, "I have to go check on my ducks." I was confused, so he explained. He said that when he was deployed, he was in charge of a group of men. During their tours, they had several close calls, and one of the men was seriously wounded. When they were hit, he would always throw himself in front of danger to protect his men. Without hesitation, the man who walked out put himself in harm's way several times to save others. Even when they were hit, he would still try to rally the troops and encourage everyone to keep moving forward. The man continued. After we got back, we had the debriefing meeting. We were talking about how we all felt and what we had seen. He was quiet for most of the meeting, but when he spoke, he told us that he felt guilty for surviving when others didn't. He said that he kept replaying the moments when he threw himself in front of danger and saved lives. But he couldn't understand why he was spared. He said that he didn't know how to deal with survivor's guilt. He was crying as he said this. As he spoke, the rest of the group shared their thoughts and feelings. Many had similar feelings of guilt and sadness. But one man who had been silent up until this point stood up and began to speak. He apologized for not saying anything sooner and said that he had struggled with the same feelings. He said that he understood what it was like to feel guilty for surviving when others didn't. He continued and said that the reason he hadn't spoken up sooner was because he didn't think that his actions were significant enough. He said that he had never thrown himself in front of danger or protected his men in the same way that this man had. He said that he just kept moving forward. The man who had originally stood up and left the room leaned forward and said, "You did more than any of us. You kept us alive. You were the calm in the storm. You kept moving forward when we all wanted to stop. Checked on us and made sure that we were okay. You picked up the pieces when we fell. You carried us when we couldn't carry ourselves. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be here today. You are our hero." This man began to cry. I had never seen such raw emotion in a group of veterans. This continued for several hours. They shared stories of bravery, loss, and healing. As I watched these grown men embrace and console one another, I was reminded of the strength and compassion that veterans have. They are true heroes. They may not wear capes or have superpowers, but they have something much more powerful: a willingness to serve and sacrifice for something bigger than themselves. They are the quiet heroes. Thank you so much for watching. Please stay tuned for more daily stories.